The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 3. Part 3. Gosberg became a kind of protector of Agnoruk within the company of mercenaries, so the half-orc found out he was someone who had a great influence on Debok, something he could not understand. However, thanks to Gosberg's influence, Agnoruk's instruction was made as short and light as possible. It was certainly a detail that Agnoruk appreciated. His training improved significantly and he was finally able to show that he was well prepared, so Debok himself accepted that the half-orc was ready to enter the action. Their first mission would be with Gosberg. They were assigned to the protection of the King of Demember, who had to make a long journey to the Kingdom of Beer. His Majesty wanted to seal a trade agreement so that he could obtain large quantities of his magnificent iron. At least nothing special was expected on the trip, a routine protection mission. The endowment of mercenaries would be the basic, Gosberg, Agnoruk along with a dozen other mercenaries. The mission would last at least 4 months, which pleased the half-orc who needed to lose sight of Almera and his companions. A week later, Gosberg said goodbye to his son, a Denka of giant proportions named Zvodimir Sabu. Agnoruk had not seen in years such an impressive being. In his youth he had seen the huge ogres of the snows and had also fought against some dragon. Both were immense beings, but Sabu was also giant and much faster. Gosberg's son would stay in Almera. The rest of the company was preparing for an important mission, but no one told the half-orc a word about that mission. It was a well-kept secret by Debok. The journey to Demember was pleasant and short. Everyone was relaxed and in a good mood, not expecting any danger. It was an easy job. They just had to stay out of trouble and return home with the company's reputation intact. Then they would charge a good sum of gold. The court of the King of Demember was like a fairy tale, full of luxury and princesses everywhere. The king was married to at least 50 women apart from having numerous concubines. A custom that surprised the half-orc, who thought that was getting into a lot of trouble. Agnoruk could barely deal with a woman like holding 100. At least on a first impression everyone seemed to be happy inside Demember's court, something surprising. However, the journey from Demember to the Kingdom of Beer was another story, a real suffering. The excessive number of components of the royal entourage made the progress slow. There were days when there was hardly any progress. If His Highness did not feel like moving forward, they spent 3 days camped in the same place. The half-orc despaired, since he did not understand such parsimony, and he was beginning to be fed up with the whispering of some of the components of the king's entourage. Agnoruk decided to join the advance scouts of the entourage despite having to ride horses. But he didn't want to get into any mess. With a death sentence a year he had enough. His Royal Highness was usually a kind person, but when something didn't go according to what His Majesty thought, he suffered terrible fits of anger. Fortunately for the whole entourage the journey went as planned, well with a little delay for the days of rest of the king. The problem arose when they arrived in Tame, the capital of the Kingdom of Beer. The king began to suffer a series of terrible belly pains that none of the doctors who treated him were able to cure. Which was a misfortune for the couple of doctors since in a fit of anger of the king they lost their minds, so the monarch was left without anyone to supervise his health, which was a huge upheaval for the court. The Crown of Beer informed them that in Xeres on the northern border of the kingdom there was a doctor with great fame when it came to treating digestive diseases. Gosberg and Agnoruk were sent to Xeres to hire the service of the famous doctor. Their fees were no problem and they had to bring him to Beer as soon as possible. Nobody knew that the king could happen if he lost his nerve definitively. The pair of mercenaries left at dawn. Neither of them liked to ride and they were walking. Agnoruk had only agreed to travel on horseback with the explorers because he hated much more the whispers and rumors of the king's court. Anyway, they advanced fast. The roads of Beer were well conditioned and safe. Both were good walkers, so they advanced a great distance each day. They arrived in Xeres after a week's journey. Finding the famous doctor was easy, convincing him to go with them to the capital was even easier since they had gold to spare for that. But the doctor did not want to travel at night at least the first day, so they decided that before sleeping it was best to go for a drink to celebrate the deal. And nothing better than the doctor's favorite tavern to make it, La Mesa de Ordoni, which was also an inn where travelers could rest. Arian knew that it was her last night in the place. Tomorrow, although she had paid in advance 1 more week, she would disappear. She did not know what to do. Surely she would play everything for the whole and leave alone to the south, which was dangerous. The young woman was immersed lamenting her fateful fate when she observed that a most striking trio entered, without a doubt. One of them knew him by sight. He was a frequent customer of the place, a middle-aged man with elegant clothes who was also treated with great respect by all the other customers who frequented the place. That he loved to play cards, always betting large sums of gold, and to his surprise the Tahors let him win sometimes. The other 2 members of the trio were new to the place, or at least did not come since she was staying. They looked like foreigners by their clothes, an elegant light blue uniform with a darker blue phoenix and embroidered with gold thread. They carried weapons and backpacks that made the young woman suppose that they had recently arrived in Xeres. One of the 2 strangers was quite tall, corpulent, black manner, sporting a beard of the same color as his hair but unkempt, piercing black eyes. Attractive, thought Arian. The young man, after talking to his other 2 companions, stayed at the bar and ordered a beer. Then there was the other member of the group. Arian had heard of them, but had never seen one of them live, a Denka. It took some disappointment to be bear-like beings expecting something much bigger. However, the Denka he observed was small and robust. That if he had a cheerful and jovial expression, he talked animatedly with the middle-aged man. In the end, they both decided to go play cards and sat at one of the best tables in the tavern. All the players who were experts in card games hardly tasted the drinks, but not the Denka, that since he took a seat he did not stop drinking beer and other liquors in a huge way. He was certainly not a professional. He also invited all his fellow partisans to a round. As he perished, he had no qualms about spending a large amount of gold tonight. The best players began to be interested in that table and some were added while the most prudent decided to leave it. Really, in the end, the worst of the clientele of Ordoni was gathered. All of them had participated in the few fights that were in the place during the stay of the young woman. The Denka was confident and always invited anyone who joined the game table to a drink. There was laughter and many jokes at that table, but they were not most sincere, gave the impression that the Denka was a pigeon entering a trap full of snakes. Arian noticed the other companion of the Denka again, was quite bored and did not pay much attention to the game, took 1 more mug of beer and leaned on the bar. The young woman decided to go up to the room, and on her way to the stairs she passed by the young man, so she could examine him more closely. She could not explain it, but there was something special inside him. The young man raised his head and his 2 black eyes were fixed on Arian. She stopped for an instant but lowered her head as she passed by him to show feigned indifference. The young man did not pay attention to Arian and concentrated again on the card game in which his companions participated. Arian arrived at his room, the most economical of the posed to be next to the tavern and the alley. It was too noisy for a proper rest but had a privileged position to spy on what was happening in the living room, because one of the planks of the floor was loose and giving it a little. A slit opened from which the whole room could be seen.